Welcome, everybody, to With Thunder's Applause, a podcast where two friends get together to discuss the events and ideas that will shape our uncertain future. And sometimes we just bullshit about Star Wars. If you
Today
didn't
is
get
one of
from
those days.
our name. Today is one of those days. It is Shooting the Poodoo, episode 30. Do we have a clever subtitle?
I just called it Updates and Ahsoka. Not too big.
Fair enough. I am
Yeah.
your host, Steve, along with my co-host, Zach. What's up, bro?
Nothing much, man. The wife went to Monterey for the kids' field trip, and I
Cool.
spent the day cleaning the carpets. Definitely just as cool as going to Monterey. I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, my day was fairly eventful. I spent a little bit of time in the kids' classroom today with the teacher who this is her first full-time teaching gig.
Oh my!
She's only subbed a couple years, and she's only had a credential for like a year.
Mm-hmm.
And she got handed like one of the most difficult classes on groups of students on the campus because they're all the kids that's basically skipped kindergarten because of COVID. Because in COVID, kindergarten doesn't really do anything. So they tried to make these optional Zoom get-togethers, but kids don't have an attention span, and the whole thing about kindergarten is learning social boundaries and shit.
Yeah.
And so they have none.
Yeah.
And this poor woman is she's 24 or something. Anyway, I'm gonna start hanging out fairly regularly just to be the hard ass that space needs. Because those kids need fucking discipline, and they needed it 2 fucking years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, just things like turn around. You're your teacher is mid-sentence telling you something important, and you just are so oblivious to what your teacher is saying that you turn around and start talking to someone. It's you get that you're a kid, but there's some time and a place to dick around, and it's definitely not the first 5 minutes or the first 20 minutes of the day. You racket discipline. Those guys are so fucking racist. They're so fucking racist, but it's also pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's iconic, I should say.
Yeah.
Cool. So also I took today a first aid class that was 4.5 hours. Learned how to do CPR and operate an AED and learn a little bit about first aid. It was very light on the first aid. Virtually no practical on the first aid.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's actually what you end up needing way more often, but it's usually not going to save a life.
Yeah. Dude, as dumb as it sounds, it'd be really nice to understand how to properly tie a bandage right on a particular place, because some places are pretty challenging.
Yeah.
Or I would always keep this kind of adhesive bandage in my first aid kit, because when people get injuries in these places, they never have a bandage that's functional for them.
Right.
So I'd get these knuckle bandages or whatever. We talked about burns, and they're specific, I think they call them hydrosol bandages, but they're basically got a fucking gel on the inside, and it keeps the area moist. But it's a burn bandage. It's fucking awesome.
It's pretty cool. Everything I know about first aid, I learned from having cats and a clumsy wife. And then in terms of CPR, I haven't done it since, I think I was in the Navy. They made us do it.
Yeah.
That was the last time.
Yeah, because you got no fucking doctors.
Yeah, yeah.
We have a ship medic and shit, but
Doc, yeah.
He could be on the other side of the fucking boat, and that could take minutes. And on a submarine, probably not that long, but an aircraft carrier, that shit could take fucking...
Yeah, aircraft carrier
20
for
minutes.
sure.
Walk one side to the other, right?
Most people could make it from one side of the ship to the other in under 28 seconds.
Oh, even on a carrier?
No. Submarine. Yeah. Somebody asked us about submarines in one of the comments.
Yeah, somebody in the chat asked about submarines. I think it's your friend Chris.
It might be.
Because it was a very specific question about fucking submarines.
Yeah.
And he would be one of the only people who would know that you served on a submarine. I guess anybody that watches
this, we talked about it. Yeah. We've talked about it. And
he wants to hear. And I responded to that question.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Not from the official account, though. I should.
Oh, okay.
Should have said Zach knows. He has an interest in things that are Long and hard and full of semen.
Mm-hmm.
Juvenile jokes. So we're gonna do an update today on and my back. I pinched a nerve. My back fucking hurts like a motherfucker. So
yes,
part of my face is stoned, part of it is intense pain. But damn junkies made it fucking hard to just like get a script for muscle relaxers or painkillers.
Oh yeah,
more than you need for a specific injury.
Yeah.
And just have some in the cupboard. So when shit like this happens, I'm like, at least I got some muscle relaxers to get me to my chiropractor appointment on Wednesday. But
yeah, we're down to like one Percocet, so let's hope nothing bad happens.
Percocet?
Yeah.
You're on Percocet?
No. Wifey had them for
you're just saying you were able to stash a few for
yeah. She just was like, I don't really feel bad. So.
Like, I get it, people abuse it, but then people like me are like, I can't get to the chiropractor in 5 days.
Yeah.
It's gonna be like 75 degrees for the next few days. And like I got a shit ton of stuff getting ready for fall and winter in the garden.
Yeah.
Bunch of work that's got to get done as it cools off. And I can't do shit because I can barely fucking move at any point. We have a great show. We got an episode 3 of Ahsoka. We're going to talk about on the second half.
Tear it apart. I mean, I love Ahsoka and I love Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly.
It's got its good parts, but like I expect more from writers, I think, is the problem.
I think I expect more too, and Dave Filoni's not a good writer.
Yeah. Well,
we're going to talk about Ahsoka later.
Yeah. Yes, we will.
All right, what else are we talking about today?
Throw the rest.
We're going to talk about Oliver Anthony. We discussed this song a few weeks back, Richmond, North of Richmond, and how we shouldn't talk about it as a working class anthem because of some of the themes. Apparently, he's come out and made some corrections, and also has demonstrated integrity in like refusing to play into the right-wing culture war bullshit.
Yeah.
Like he's been invited on all these shows, podcasts, all this shit. People want to fucking talk to him, and we'll get to his response here momentarily, but he exhibited some integrity. And while I disagree with his political positions on some things, I did think that it was the only just and honorable thing to do would be to add this to the story and picture we've painted previously.
Yes.
And then we got some kind of interesting discussion between Nate, Canadian Prepper, and one of his guests this week. And there was just a couple sound bites that I thought were really interesting that could stimulate a decent conversation. So without further ado, let's roll into Oliver Anthony, I believe.
That is correct.
Let's do it.
It's aggravating seeing people on conservative news try to identify with me like I'm one of them. It's aggravating seeing certain musicians and politicians act like we're buddies and act like we're fighting the same struggle here, like that we're trying to present the same message. It was fun. It was funny seeing it at the presidential debate because it's like I wrote that song about those people, So for them to have to sit there and listen to that cracks me up. But it was funny kind of seeing the response to it. Like that song has nothing to do with Joe Biden, It's a lot bigger than Joe Biden. That song is written about the people on that stage and a lot more too, not just them, but definitely them.
Very explicit call out of the Republican debate and also saying I wrote that song about people like them. Let's put this up there on the screen. He also tweeted this out, quote, "I don't support either side politically, not the left, not the right. I'm about supporting people and restoring local communities. Now breathe some fresh air and relax, please. I'm not worth obsessing over, I promise. Go spend some time with your loved ones." He also put out a Facebook post basically saying some of this as well. "I apologize for beating a dead horse. I need to address this quote in my video earlier since it's been misquoted. Corporate news is now trying to twist me into being a Biden supporter. Richmond, North of Richmond is about corporate-owned DC politicians on both sides. Though Biden is most certainly a problem, the lyrics aren't exclusively knocking Biden. It is bigger and broader than that. It is knocking the system collectively, including the corporate-owned conservative politicians that were on stage that night. Good night, everyone, and thanks again." So
yeah, dude.
You never know who's going to use your message when you're an artist. A lot of artists write messages that aren't even meant to be fully understood, just kind of interpreted. I don't think this is one of those pieces of art, but you definitely open yourself up to having your message hijacked.
Yeah, I highly recommend everybody check out that full clip because he goes into some more stuff. They address the fudge rounds thing and how he kind of discusses that and kind of says like essentially like kind of what I was saying, giving him the benefit of the doubt was like song kind of writes itself and you're like, hey, this works, right? But just talking about
how I get that now.
He said it was it wasn't necessarily against people on welfare getting fudge rounds when they're 300 pounds, but like that it was just kind of pointing out the absurdity of the system that like people
you could definitely
poor and the way, and he mentioned in the quote that Sagar mentions later, he quotes like Big Ag and like the cozy relationship between Big Ag and the welfare and how like fudge rounds might be the only thing you can get with your food stamps.
That's what I was going to say. Is with very little effort. You can defend the statement and just be like, oh, I mean, it could have been any nutritionless food, and it would have been the same thing. It's really hard to be on the internet and not get hate anyway.
Yeah, I felt that I still don't think it's we should adopt it as a working class anthem.
No, it's got too many problems.
When you need a bunch of asterisks and footnotes to it, it might not be as clean as we need it to be if it's going to be adopted by the revolution or whatever.
Exactly.
But I did want to showcase his integrity, and he seems to be a pretty reasonable human being, kind of person that you could probably run into at some podunk gas station in the middle of fucking nowhere and like have an exchange with an individual and be like, oh, that seemed like a pretty fucking nice guy. Mm-hmm. I liked how he was kind of like giddy. He's like, they don't get it that this is about them too. It's kind of funny. Like they're fucking oblivious. Like, no more laughing. So let's move on.
It hurts to laugh.
It does, dude. It hurts to breathe deeply because it's like where it is on my back. It's right behind my lungs. So when my chest expands and moves stuff around back there, it fucking hurts.
Yeah, I've had a lot of back issues in my life. So.
All right, moving on to some Canadian preppers. So he interviewed this guy, Mike Shelby, who is an open source intelligence guy. I should have done more homework on him. He has a book coming out. I think he did. He was an intelligence. I don't think he was an officer. I think he was in intelligence, but he was an enlisted guy in military intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And so took some of those skills and have applied them to like open source stuff and like kind of learning how to sift through the bullshit and find out what's actually happening, independent of the official narrative makers.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I wanted to include some of his stuff because not that it's like particularly profound, but just because it kind of like fairly succinctly like provides some tools for sifting through the bullshit. And one of the things, that we've tried to make a mission of this channel, we should really do a channel intro where we lay out the mission clearly. Maybe we can draft it while we're driving in the car together for several hours over next weekend because we're going camping.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I thought that he provides a really basic, what is it called, a mnemonic device or an acronym that kind of helps you as like an assessment tool. So I wanted to include a little bit of that. Let's let it roll.
We're looking at correct information that can be shared incorrectly, like the game of telephone, right? Someone hears.
So I'm sorry, just to provide a bit of context for this, they're just talking about like navigating all sorts of crises, like it's a prepper show. So they're talking about navigating crises in an era of fake news and kind of really accepting the fact that like just about everything you hear and see from whatever faction, is absolute horseshit. And that there's not a lot of truth being circulated. So anyway, continue. And he's talking about the game of telephone as kind of a
an analogy
fair
for it.
example of how information gets distorted, even when
Something-
it's not being intentionally distorted.
Yeah.
Say, oh, I need to go tell Mike, or I need to go share this with a bunch of people. And then it's just incorrectly or inaccurately communicated. So, that's number one. And then, the flip side of that is someone well-meaning could be correctly sharing inaccurate information because that's what they receive. So that would be kind of disinformation. So when you're doing human analysis, you always want to analyze the source. Okay. So over a period of time, sources develop what's called source reliability, or a history of reporting. Yeah. They've generated 10 reports. We can go back and judge the veracity of those reports. Were they right or were they wrong? And we can say, hey, this person is almost always usually correct. He's got an A source. He's an A-rated source. And so that's the very first thing I'm looking at, source description. Where did this information come from? And if you got it secondhand, great. What's the primary source on that?
Yep.
And so we want to track that information back to a primary source, if at all possible. It's number one. And then we're looking at the information, the actual content of the message itself. I developed, this is probably not it's the best that I could come up with, but fact, FACT, it's a little mnemonic I came up with, but F, is it feasible, right? Is this information feasible? Like, let's take Maui, for instance, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many emails I got. Oh, Mike, you should be looking into the lasers, the space lasers that set Hawaii ablaze. Well, I mean, dude, it's 2023. It wouldn't surprise me, but I actually don't know. I haven't even had any time to look into it. Not that I may be able to come to an accurate determination anyway, but is that feasible? I mean, yeah, I mean, it's probably feasible. Let's maybe ask some physicists and some, space program people.
Is it feasible, right? But technical feasibility does not make likely. I prefer Occam's razor in place of that just feasible, because you're like, sure, I guess a monkey could learn how to talk if it had a surgery to change its
too many things are feasible nowadays is the problem, or on the edge of feasibility.
And I think kind of what he was leaning into is like, is it possible that they could have weaponized they have weapons up there that are disguised as satellites, basically?
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, that's feasible, but unlikely.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, technically feasible, but not likely given the expensive resources and everything else.
Well, not only that, but you're talking about something that is very easily trackable. We have a whole lot of science, and if something shot down a satellite, you could look at how it was spinning and reverse engineer it to kind of figure out where the blast came from, et cetera, et cetera. And so it'd be really hard to hide something. It would most likely have a very large visible light signature too. So yeah, it's harder and harder. But yeah, I mean, that is a good point of feasibility though, is just would it be possible to hide this thing like I'm recommending? Oh, there's lasers up in space that are shooting down satellites. How likely are we to notice that?
Oh, right. And he's not talking about lasers shooting down satellites. He's talking about using them to start fires.
Right.
Which is why I'm like Occam's razor, bro.
Yeah. Well, the amount of power you'd have to have, the amount of loss that would occur traveling through the atmosphere, just the fact that the atmosphere would misdirect
it.
It would bend the laser. You would have to have a very, very high powered laser in order to start a fire in a few seconds, which would pretty much be all you would have, because it'd be very hard to focus it.
Yeah, precisely. Or have it hit one spot for any length of time when it's something that's, At any rate, so in that case, technically feasible is not likely. So I don't necessarily like feasible, but it's a good place to start, and it makes a good acronym. So let's continue.
And then we move on to A. Is it apt? Is this something that we could expect to happen? Is it appropriate for something like that to happen?
Oh, I think you background.
I don't know. If I were going to set fires, it probably wouldn't be in Maui. Well, let me see. If I were a foreign actor setting fires, it probably wouldn't be to Maui. I mean, it's the middle of summer. It'd probably be in the Mountain West. I mean, y'all, Canada, Western US, we deal with that stuff all the time. They're absolutely catastrophic. And then the next thing is it consistent? Is it consistent with the previous reporting, or consistent with what we have known to be true in the past? And then lastly, is it timely? Is this the correct time for this to happen? We're almost always going to be dealing with degrees of confidence. So, this is likely to be true, or this is not likely to be true. And man, I'll be honest, sometimes that's just the best you're going to get.
I mean, that's the best we all get. That's why philosophers have been talking about the nature of truth for fucking 5,000 years or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, the best we're gonna get is what's likely, and that's why I mentioned Occam's razor. It's just like it's just so much easier to be like, okay, an issue like, you know, Maui fires, like fires start all the time and they burn, and like there's all sorts of conditions. There were missteps, right? People have already resigned and been fired and questioned, and as far as I know. And so yeah, they fucking botched it because no one expects disasters like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not normal. But under climate change, like we better get fucking used to shit like that. That just like, I don't know, I've never seen anything like it, because that's what climate change means.
Yeah.
Right?
Things are going to get normal.
Yeah. It's going to be abnormal until it settles into the new normal, because that's what climate change is. Yes, exactly. At any rate, like, highly unlikely. When they talk about, because some people were like, oh God, developers started this fire to get rid of these poor people so they could build a resort there. It's like, more likely. We have an example right close to home.
Yeah.
It wasn't developers that burned it down. PG&E burned it down because they've opted to neglect, regular repairs and maintenance to give their shareholders more money.
I think it's really hard to not
more money. Sorry, go ahead.
I think it's really hard to not jump directly to someone doing it for money when there have been too many instances where like things were done for money. You know, like during Katrina, how they just kind of like didn't send help there, and then lo and behold, a lot of the properties along the riverbanks got bought up by big businesses.
Yeah,
and like it's hard not to look to the past, see what horrible things have been done by people with too much money and power, and then expect that they're going to repeat that process elsewhere.
Right, but the developers in Louisiana didn't cause Katrina.
No, not at all.
They didn't make Katrina hit that city.
Yeah.
They didn't make that city build itself on a fucking reclaimed swamp that's supposed to be below the waterline.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like in Maui, it's probably a similar thing. There were fucking real estate developers chomping at the bit, just like in Paradise. I'm not sure about how many developers, but like the county definitely made it harder for poor people to move back.
Yeah.
They like set a minimum fucking square footage to a house.
Yeah, didn't they make it so you couldn't have a
cottage,
like a trailer? Yeah, or like a trailer.
Yeah, I mean, people lived in trailers. I don't know if they got rid of mobile home parks altogether, but they basically made it so like you can't live in a dwelling that's less than like 1,200 square feet, which eliminated like the vast majority, like all single wides.
Which is completely ridiculous, just due to the fact that like as a single human being, you don't need much more than 400, and as a pair of human beings, like 800 is typically good enough.
If you have a significant outdoor space or a lifestyle that doesn't leave much time for being home.
Yeah.
Dude, I lived in 80 square feet for fucking 15 months.
Yeah. I lived in
and it wasn't a prison cell.
I lived in like 340. It was an old hotel that got transformed into an apartment.
Oh yeah, it's like a little fucking motor hotel. Yeah.
Dude, it ended up being like too big, honestly. Like I had chairs that I never used.
It was just the right size. I liked hanging out at your house.
You talking about the apartment or the
on the north end of Esplanade?
Yeah.
I like that place.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say it was too big, but it was definitely appropriate size for a single person.
I had like chairs that I didn't use, and I had to get rid of when I moved. I was just like, I never even use these. Yeah.
Yeah, and you had it pretty packed too. If you were going to live there long term, I could definitely see scaling a lot of that back so you have more space to move around.
It's funny. It makes me think there's a video game that Bryce and Lucas and I were playing called Rust. And it's all about like, it's a survival thing. And you like are trying to, protect your base from other people and all that. So I was like, all right, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to build small and hide because we suck. And like it always reminded me, because like in those ones, you'd like hop over furniture in order to get places and shit like that. I was like, I did that. Hopped over furniture.
Awesome. We have one more clip of this, I think.
We do.
Every piece of social science research that I've ever read on failed states where there's been some kind of state breakdown or failure of legitimacy. Government's propped up by three things: legitimacy, capacity, and authority. So legitimacy is the right to be in charge, the acknowledgement of the people. The capacity is the money, the resources to carry out government duties. And then finally, authority is the legal right. And so, when those things start to break down, yeah, you're absolutely right. Again, I read a lot of social science for fragile states and war zones. That always gets sent back down to someone who's not a member of the government who takes charge. And so I look at the local political structure, and it's a lot more than just parties and policies. It's individuals who is in my local government, who's not elected and maybe even not a member of a political party officially, but who's going to make the rules when this event happens? What committee or what individual is going to be responsible for saying, yes, everyone's going to wear a mask. Yes, we're going to shut down all the stores. And, okay, you can't go outside your home after 8 p.m. Who is going to be calling those shots? And I think that's a very important part in analyzing local politics and governance and governance. And just the last thing, government can go away. Politics are going to stay. We humans are political creatures because we're social creatures. But if the government goes away, your neighborhood or community, you're still going to have some kind of politics, even if we're not talking about political party.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So the context for that is that he was like, oh, I was just watching Threads again for like the umpteenth time or whatever. And Threads was a pretty popular movie in the 80s about nukes hitting the UK. I don't even think they said what town they were in because it wasn't relevant.
Any town, UK.
Yeah, it wasn't relevant. There was a military base nearby. The whole first third of the movie, they're noticing like more and more activity, and they're watching the newsreel or the 6 o'clock news or whatever, and seeing how shit is escalating. And then all of a sudden, it's just like air raid siren, everybody ducks and covers, boom, aftermath. What do we do? And then the long term aftermath, they kind of zoomed ahead quite a bit. Pretty fucked up movie, but as it was supposed to be. It was kind of part of the anti-nuclear movement in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Kind of like China Syndrome and the day after. Yeah, I think it's called The Day After. Yeah, which had like John Lithgow and a couple other fairly large actors at the time. What's his name? Steve
Buscemi?
What's
Martin.
that?
Say
Not
Buscemi?
Buscemi.
Martin?
No. Gutenberg, Steve Gutenberg, and
Oh wow,
John Lithgow. Yeah, so very 80s. Came out around the same time. Anyway, so Nate, Canadian Prepper, is like asked him about that, and that like in that movie, there's a character. It's just like all the bureaucrats. Part of the whole beginning when they realize that like this shit could escalate, they just get all these checklists, and they get into a bunker and they get supplies and stuff, and they're just going to follow the checklist. And so that's what he was asking. He's like, what happens like in that scenario where then like they weren't able to get a hold of anybody? They're just kind of like trying to make it up as they go, but they wound up being like completely unnecessary to the situation because it was just fucking pandemonium.
Right.
And that's why he's like, well, in times of disaster, it's good to know who works at the city, not just your elected officials, but the people who actually make the operation that run the organization. And I think that's really sound advice, knowing a lot about how especially local government works, but government broadly, understanding organizational structure and hierarchy and all that stuff, procedure, legacy, right? And understanding how individuals within organizations make things happen or make things don't happen if you don't want them to happen. You can be quite obstructionist as a bureaucrat if you'd like to be.
I bet quite a few people that are just like, I'm really not into politics. And it's like, that statement says that you're just someone who's useful to other people, and what side you're useful to is determined entirely by them now instead of you. And so, yeah. And he's absolutely right. We're social and we are political creatures, and even trying to do nothing is still doing a thing.
Well, right.
There's a song about that.
Which is something that I've often repeated when people are like, oh, I'm not into politics, or I don't follow politics. I'm like, well, like deciding, like you and your roommates deciding like where to order food from and what to order is a political discussion.
Oh yeah.
It's multiple people that each have competing interests coming together to negotiate those interests on behalf of the greater good, the good of all.
Yeah. And
right? And they're like, I want to eat anchovies and fucking pepperoni. And they're like, I puke every time I eat anchovies. Yeah. Okay, cool. We'll leave the anchovies off.
All right. Instead, we'll get porpoise.
Porpoise with squid.
Yeah.
How about squid? I'm sure. There's calamari.
Moreover,
I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, moreover, I'm referring to the idea, that people are just like, well, I have a lot of problems with eating, creatures that I consider intelligent. And it's like, that's a political statement right there. Like,
well, that's a super political.
Yeah.
It's also a human supremacist statement. Because I was just thinking the other day about how plants, you don't have to call it like intelligence, like they're making a conscious decision. But what is that? When biologically, that plant will put on more I've been substituting smoking cannabis for smoking tobacco because I quit smoking like 6 weeks ago. And I have been getting to the proper headspace more than I have in a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Because I usually just smoke like a little bit, right? At the end of the day. I don't really get like fucking like, oh shit, I'm fucking high as shit. I've also dropped into a couple dispensaries just to check them out now that they're open.
Yeah.
And so that the weed is significantly higher quality than the shit that sits in a plastic tote in my garage all summer. It's significantly higher quality. Anyway,
process that stuff.
I get into a pretty good headspace. And I was just thinking about like ideal comfort because it was cooling off. And today it was like super windy and overcast and it almost rained, but it didn't. And I don't know about down south. Is it all fucking hot and sunny there?
No, we're getting some of that.
Cool.
Tomorrow is supposed to be a high of like 79.
Perfect.
It's 80 on Sunday, and I think it starts to go back up on Monday.
Yeah, we're low all weekend too, but we're forecast in the mid to upper 70s.
Nice.
With a low around 60 for like 3 or 4 days, and then it's going to get up to the low 80s, low to mid 80s.
Which considering
I've been here, I've gone fucking floating, Labor Day floating at Chico State. Like when I was a college student, it was like 105 degrees.
Yeah.
So this is fucking magic. I don't know what the fuck this is, but if this is climate change,
it's global warming.
Bring it on, bitches.
You like as we were talking, I was like, "There's a song that perfectly encapsulates this," and I can't remember what it was. And then I was like, "No, I think I got it. It's Free Will by Rush." Like,
oh, you know what you should do? Pull up the lyrics and read those while I go get another beer before we talk about Ahsoka. But I just want to end on the Canadian prepper stuff. I think that he was absolutely. I thought that was pretty succinct and also very wise because Nate tends to like dabble in quite a bit of kind of like conspiracy adjacent stuff. And I thought that was a fucking solid answer because most of his viewers, if you go to his chat, and most prepper viewers are kind of people that occupy that kind of right-wing survivalist space or whatever. Dude, they're like, oh, when the grid goes down, like the fucking black people are just going to be animals, like crawling out like cockroaches. They don't say that, but you can tell by the language and the tone of voice that they're worried about them urbans coming out to their suburbans or out to their rural area and like taking their shit. And it's very like human beings are going to fucking just massacre each other like a purge as soon as like political institutions begin to break down. And this guy, alternatively provided, he's like, no, we're going to make fucking decisions. And it doesn't matter if there's a government bureaucrat there. Like people will still get together and be like, hey, what do we need? And he's like, and that's why we need to focus on local, which is something I've been talking about for a number of years now, especially when it comes to kind of like left-wing politics. It's like, if we're not building what we coined a material basis of resistance, if we're not actively learning to feed ourselves, right, provide our own communications networks, provide our own medical care, right, which is why I took a Stop the Bleed class and why I took like a CPR and first aid class. Like, we're not going to save people from fucking getting gut shot or something, like in a scenario where we don't have access to a hospital, but we can better survive situations where police and EMTs are unable to respond or are not responding to your neighborhood and or are off doing other things more important to them. Right? Like we are putting ourselves in a position to be resilient. And I think that's really important. And I think that, swearing off politics like this, Oliver, to tie those two together, like Oliver Anthony being like, well, the whole system's corrupt, I'm not political. That's kind of a genuine sentiment that I think fits perfectly with, well, everything is political. Let's focus where we can have the biggest impact, which is mutual aid groups.
Right. Well, and it's almost like what he's really saying is like, I'm not political in that I don't care about, identity politics. I don't care about abortion or whatever. Necessarily. I care about the fact that we're being ground into dust by rich men.
Yeah, we're just working and getting nowhere, just spinning wheels is how I tell my therapist most of the time.
Yeah.
It's like, how are you feeling this week? I was like, I don't know, man. I feel like I'm fucking spinning my wheels.
It's really hard to find support groups when you're like, hi, I'm a veteran, but I don't particularly like my country right now.
Yeah, I think there is some of that. That's what Gamers for Peace was for me.
Yeah.
Is a space with, and to a lesser extent, fucking Veterans for Peace, because most of that's just boomers and shit. Or vets of social organizing and social movements from like decades and decades and decades ago with no real firm understanding of the conditions for young people today. And I don't even mean young people. I just mean like global war on terror vets. Like our experience is fundamentally different.
Now getting to be in our 40s.
Now in our 40s. Yeah, 100%. So at any rate, I really liked that. I wanted to include it because we do talk about survivalist stuff. And I thought that was really important because it kind of fits in. And I think there's a lot less daylight between certain factions of the right and certain factions of the left than a lot of people would assume. And I think that, we need to have conversations about maybe not discussing something like abortion that like largely doesn't affect us. Right? Like, sure, you can make it illegal for that person over there that you don't know and you'll never know. You can make it illegal or criminalize them to have an abortion. But like realistically speaking, when you're just dealing with keeping your own house in the order, I have some friends that would freak the fuck out if they even
if they thought about
mentioning horseshoe theory, because horseshoe theory is not true. I think there's a fundamental difference between the far left and the far right. So far right is motivated largely by xenophobia and authoritarianism. The far left suffers from being like absolute liberation politics and nothing else. Right. And so, that's kind of a caricature. I don't want to try and sum up like, hundreds of years of political thinking in, just a simple sentence like that, an ignorant sentence like that. Yeah. But I don't think that there's a gulf when you like want domination over liberation. Those are pretty dichotomous opposite side of the spectrum.
I think the idea is that it's closer than we care to admit. Obviously, it's not the same. A horseshoe doesn't meet at the end. It just gets very close as compared to some of the other things on the spectrum. It's obviously nothing. You're not going to make a diagram like that and explain everything to everyone immediately. It's just kind of like making a point.
No. And I don't disagree with you. I kind of am like, no, there is quite a bit, there are lefties that are also quite authoritarian. Like, we come in all stripes. Our politics are as varied as our fucking DNA, man.
I mean, that's the thing is like, if you hold an opinion strong enough, then you think you know better than other people in the end. And it's not much of a stretch from I think I know better than others to I'm going to enforce my way of thinking on others. And so it's like, I get it. I get the concept of it. But yeah, it doesn't stand up to rigorous examination.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, why don't you read the lyrics of Free Will? And I'm going to excuse myself for just a moment.
Indeed.
BRB.
All right. So we've got this. It's from Rush, man. Rush, an old ass band. a long time ago, talking about things still relevant today. Like, there are those who think that life has nothing left to chance, a host of holy horrors to direct our aimless dance. A planet of playthings, we dance on the strings of powers we cannot perceive. The stars aren't aligned, or the gods are maligned. Blame is better to give than receive. You can choose a ready guide in some celestial voice. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. You can choose from phantom fears and kindness that can kill. I will choose a path that's clear. I will choose free will. This could be fucking Dr. Seuss, by the way. There are those who think that they were dealt a losing hand. The cards were stacked against them. They weren't born in Lotus Land. All preordained, a prisoner in chains, a victim of venomous fate. Kicked in the face, you can pray for a place in heaven's unearthly estate. You can choose a ready guide in some celestial voice, but if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. You can choose from phantom fears and kindness that can kill. I will choose a path that's clear. I will choose free will. Each of us, a cell of awareness, imperfect and incomplete, genetic blends with uncertain ends on a fortune hunt that's far too fleet. You can choose a ready guide in some celestial voice. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
You still made a choice.
You can choose from phantom fears and kindness that can kill. I will choose a path that's clear. I will choose free will.
Bro, I love fucking Rush. You know me.
Yeah, but it's a great song.
Like
It's got a great point. And like I was saying, it's fucking old as hell, and the ideas still stand. And that is, everything in our lives is a choice, regardless of whether we see it as that or not. Just the fact that you're thinking about whether I want to do something or not is you making a choice.
Yeah, dude. 100%. Let's fucking talk about.
They're fucking poets. Let's not talk about Ahsoka. We're gonna do one more thing, then we'll talk about Ahsoka.
I should have let you play this as our thing.
It's
But
okay.
I like that. That was kind of a good impromptu. That fits well.
Yeah. It's rung true for many, many years for me. Yes.
Have you ever heard their song about the fucking trees and the axe?
No.
Oh yeah, dude, it's about fucking. It's like it's a labor song, but it's like a allegory of like trees competing
Axe
in the
handles
forest.
are made from trees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How's that feature in the song? I put that in the song.
All right.
So if you weren't aware of what that was in the video, that was a tornado.
So Leslie.
In our continuing series, Moms in Focus, CBS Jim Crawford finds necessity.
So if you weren't aware of what that was in the video, that was a tornado and an avalanche joining forces. Because like, why not at this point, right? That's how the world looking anyway. And that's not really much of a cause for concern. That just means that there's a boss fight taking place up there, and they just got them into the second phase.
They just got to the second phase of the boss fight. Ow! I said no more laughing.
It fucking reminds me of that meme where it's like when you just beat the boss and the music changes and gets way more intense.
Yeah, a second phase
Yeah.
or another boss.
Yep.
It's like, haha, you just defeated whoever. Here's a bigger boss.
Yep. Or here's phase 2 of him. That's not even his final form.
Yeah, which happened to me recently.
Yep. You fought a boss who changed forms and you had to fight a second fight?
Yeah, you fight a boss and you kill him, and then another boss pops up and you're like, oh shit. And you're like, hey, how can I not beat this guy? And it turns out you're not supposed to beat him.
Yeah.
So like, he's fucking insane. Like, I don't know what to do.
Oh,
got his power down below.
Were you
like
playing Path of Exile?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, have you played it?
I have, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm back in I didn't get very far. Send you back to the beginning of the map and then you run different quests in the same maps.
Yeah.
Kind of lame.
Yeah. I didn't get very far. I was just kind of playing it in between games, and then Baldur's Gate 3 came out, and I am heavily addicted.
Yeah, you love that shit.
I love that shit, man. D&D.
You do.
I'm gonna play again on Saturday.
Cool. I just wanted to include this because, like, we talk about a lot of climate despair and shit, and I thought his reaction was perfect. It was just like, oh, there's a fucking tornado teaming up with an avalanche. Why? Just because. Like, that's just the feelings of the world right now. It's just like,
we pissed off the planet. It's fighting back. It's cool.
It's fighting back. So So I thought that was interesting. And then the little quip about the boss fight, I just thought was fucking. He's really genuinely funny. Not everything he does like lands with me. It might land with other people, but it doesn't necessarily land with me. But he's genuinely pretty fucking funny. And that's all he does. Right? What do we call it?
Like that,
the Tosh 2.0, but on TikTok?
Yeah.
Talk on TikTok?
Yep.
You just watch other people's fucking content and react to it?
Wait. We do that.
Wait, that is what we do. But we don't do it in that short. We like to actually talk about things and explore ideas.
Delightful.
That's different than just writing jokes over someone else's content.
I know. And he's getting so many more views. We're dumb.
He's been around for a while, though.
Yeah.
And he's a pretty young dude. I think Fredo's only like fucking 23 or 24.
Yeah. He doesn't look very old at all.
Kids these days.
I tore a ligament in my shoulder.
Came through the fucking mic, dude. But my fucking shoulder was like.
No. I tore a ligament in a shoulder one time from stretching in bed. So kids, don't stretch in bed. Get out of bed, then stretch.
Bro, I'm convinced that I just like did like a little tiny bit of work, but because I did put in some work. I was pulling weeds and raking and building garden beds, lifting heavy bags of fucking shit, soil and shit.
That'll do it.
But not that long and not that intense. And I think that everything tightened up. And since I didn't stretch and didn't take fucking like soak in the bath or whatever, it just got tightened and it's just pulling either which way. And so I got to get it straight.
Yeah.
Because it hurts too bad to fucking stretch. Now I do some stretching. I'm able to like kind of push against things and kind of stretch out those shoulder blades, but it's not making the pain go away. I need my fucking spine is fucking crooked. Sucks.
Just need a lot of drugs.
That's what I want, a chiropractor. But I wish that there was a chiropractor that was just like walk in every day because they're closed. It's a 3-day weekend.
Yeah.
So like, I'm like, I can't even get seen for 3 or 4 days. Like, this affects my comfort in a really big fucking way. And it's like, do I just need to like schedule a $30 appointment every single fucking Friday?
Possibly.
So that I never have to deal with this for more than a day?
Possibly, man.
Or really probably ever. Because I only go once a month and it's probably towards the end of it. I had an appointment scheduled for Wednesday. So if I went in more frequently, maybe.
Yeah, but then
I wouldn't get pulled out of position. Because I've already been working my way out of position for 3.5 weeks before I went and worked, and then my muscles tightened up and pulled me.
You know who else is probably getting all kinds of fucked up muscle problems due to age? Ahsoka. She's in her 40s now, almost 50.
Yeah. So let us begin. So this episode started with
training.
Hyperspace training.
Very, very old fashioned. Also very red pill. You know, it was definitely like, you know, I don't remember the exact quote, but it was along the lines of like, hey, you know, you need to like let go of what you need to unlearn what you've learned and all that stuff. And I was just like, take the red pill, Sabine. You'll be so powerful, you'll never know.
Red pill meaning the dark side?
No. Red pill, blue pill from the Matrix. So blue pill, you go back to your normal life. Red pill, you stay in Wonderland. Okay. That is a big idea from an old movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't really like that scene for as long as it went on. Because it just ended up devolving into Jedi-isms.
Yeah. I thought they did way too much. Like, there are so many. This is a show written by someone into fucking finding all the Easter eggs for people who are into finding all the Easter eggs. And I found it distracting, even though I'm one of those guys who, like, I'm not into finding the Easter eggs myself, but I sure as shit watch other people who do.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I am. I'm not going to put in the effort, but I'll put in like 10 minutes to watch a video about it.
Yeah, 100%. You want to point it all out? Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I watch a whole fucking.
Oh, I got one, right?
Series. Yeah. I mean, I watch a whole fucking series.
Or how am I supposed to see in this thing? And it's like Luke's verbatim.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Come on,
fun
man.
I mean, I said fun with throwback lines.
Yeah, here. So we're just talking about that training sequence. And then after the training sequence was Hera talking to the senators.
Yeah, the
cup
diplomat
sequence.
Sequence.
And then the latter half of the very, very short episode was all like fucking starfighter shit.
Well, there was a lot in between. I mean, I thought that the hubris that everyone showed was pretty terrible because, like, you all just got fooled by fucking Sheev Palpatine. A dude named Sheev tricked you into handing over all your power, and here you are. Someone's just like, "Hey, maybe we should take a chance at, finding more terrible, powerful people." And they're like, "You're just looking for your friend." And it's like, and if I fucking am, and we happen to find a terrible evil, like, would that be the worst thing ever? We can't spare the people. I'm pretty sure you can spare people.
Well, right. I think that's part of them doing the work that was necessary to tell, like, how did we get to the fucking sequels?
Yeah,
which fucking sucks. Because remember, the worst thing about the sequels is that, like, all of the important shit in the galaxy happened off screen. So now they're trying to put some of it on screen, right?
Yeah.
So back to the training sequence. I thought, as far as world building is concerned, I really loved that those holographic posts. There was a lot of people who were pointing out that was like, since Kurosawa was really influential to George Lucas, like, they went and found some other old-timey samurai people and basically pulled tropes right from their movies.
Yeah.
Like some other Japanese filmmakers who were also making samurai movies. And so there's, like, grass mats around a wooden post, which is what those things kind of look like when he was doing his holo projections.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that he had an extra pair of arms for lightsaber sparring.
He did. Yeah. Just for that.
Here's something I noticed too, is that they had her doing melee. She was practicing melee, right? Mm-hmm. And even when she put the visor on and she's trying to, like, Ahsoka's trying to get her not to necessarily just reveal herself as force sensitive, but just like, hey, like, you don't have to necessarily be force sensitive to be, like, aware of your fucking surroundings.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and to like deeply tune yourself to your surroundings. I thought there was a very clean distinction between her and what did Luke learn in the sequence on the ship. He learned how to deflect blaster bolts,
mm-hmm.
because Luke could use a force.
Yeah.
And so Luke was inherently better positioned to be able to do those exercises as basically his first fucking training with a lightsaber.
Yeah.
Remember, because he's like waving it around, like not really sure how to use it, and Obi-Wan's telling him, and he's just kind of like, "Oh, I figured it out."
Yeah.
I figured it out in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
This
ain't that hard.
This
ain't that hard. Shut up.
Yo, G Mary Sue. I'm gonna keep bringing it up, bro. I'm gonna keep bringing it up.
That's perfectly fine. It's 100% true. And I mean, like, anybody who says, like, oh, Rey was a Mary Sue, but doesn't admit that, Luke was a Luke Skywalker, I guess. I don't know. Like, he needs his own term. But
yeah. But I think it was interesting they opted not to do lightsaber stuff, because I don't think she's force sensitive. I don't think she's gonna reveal herself as force sensitive.
Well, and I question what. I mean, everyone's force sensitive to an extent, and it's as they said, it's all a matter of talent, in terms of, like, who gets a head start. But it sounds like maybe they're hinting at, like, everyone could end up at the same place with enough work.
That is absolute horseshit. I think that Hu Yang stood out as the fucking superstar of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
God damn it. Some of his shit was fucking funny.
Yeah.
Very funny in just being like, well, I'm just telling the truth, right? Like, she sucks. The Jedi would have never picked her up. Like,
I think I think his best line is like when he's having a stroke and he's like, "Closer, please."
Yeah, closer, please.
Yeah, but he's clearly, like, having a stroke.
Oh, is he?
I mean, he, like, the vocal intonation changes. She asks him if he's having
if he's done.
No. She says, like, "Oh, are you, like, short-circuited or something like that?" She says something along the lines of, like, questioning the validity of his decision-making process based upon.
Oh, because he's
like, keep getting closer. I
didn't think that as him having a stroke. I thought he was just trying to get the scan, and she's like, I think you don't realize the situation we're in. Like, you're so focused on scanning, you're unaware of the fact that we're going to get blown out of the sky.
No, there were there was stuff that was happening to him vocally. If you recall, I was like, oh, that's interesting. This a voice has an undertone. It like kind of speaks to the
you mentioned
vocoder
that
being
last
broken.
week.
Yeah, and so like I also noticed it there, and it's like it really feels like later on they mentioned like, oh, it's his programming, like he has to do it because Sabine's like, is he still on about that? And she's like, programming. And so, I mean, like, I think that there's some programming that's going wrong, and that's why she asked him, like, oh, are you short circuiting right now? Like, are you okay? And I mean, the human equivalent would be a stroke, as far as I can tell. Where you're just like, nope, my brain stopped working, like 100%, and I'm not making great decisions right now, if at all.
Yeah, and a big question about Hu Yang, because he's such a great character, and I think he adds so much to the show. I don't think that. I think without him, the stuff between Ahsoka and Sabine would be like they need somebody to be like a comic foil, but also like the asshole.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned that last time how you had to have a wisecracking droid who could tell the truth in order to make sure that like it's basically like a jester. You need someone who's there to just be like, no, she's a fucking shit Jedi.
Yeah, I did like the training scene a little bit. I like that they dwelled on it. In a 35-minute episode, it was a lot.
They're
and a lot of it was throwbacks.
Yeah, they're cutting the times down so much because like there's the I think it's like 5 minutes at the end, and I think it's like a minute and 40 seconds at the beginning for the recap from the previous one. So you're losing almost 7 minutes. So
out of 35.
Yeah, out of 35. So it's only 28. It's almost a sitcom from the fucking 90s at 22 minutes.
Yeah, except sitcoms ran 20, 22 episodes a season.
Yeah, exactly.
This runs 8.
Yeah. Names, dude. Names. Do you remember all the stuff about like Kanan and his name?
Doom, yeah.
Yeah. And then Hera, of course, the goddess of women, marriage, childbirth. And then you have Jason, which is a Greek and Hebrew word for healer. And then also it was something along the lines of like someone who unites or mends together things. And so it was like, oh, he mentions like, I want to be a Jedi. And of course, if you follow Star Wars at all, there was a Jason Solo who just completely disappeared in this.
Yeah, the character plays homage to.
Yeah, and so it feels like it's an homage to it. And Jason in the Legends was a healer who eventually like went so far in his healing that he was of the rifts in between Jedi and Sith and stuff like that he was like, I really feel like we're just misunderstanding each other. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to disappear and I'm going to study the dark
side. It's a big part of the theme, I think, of the post Lucas era of Star Wars is they're leaning in because Filoni wrote the Bendu, which I thought was one of the fucking coolest characters, like Force users in all of the fucking lore. He's fucking rad. And then also
Jolie
Bendu, who, like Sabine, could not really effectively use the Force, although he kind of like approached that in the last scene. Yeah. Right. Like, and I mean, he's fighting blind, so there's already something to that, but it's that scene where he just steps out. Because it's one thing to like know your opponents and they're in clanky armor and like you're blind, so of course your fucking hearing is improved. Like that's normal in the real world for like when you lose one of your senses, your other senses like are able to kind of compensate for. You learn how to use your other senses to compensate for missing that one primary sense. And he does, but it was in that final scene in Rogue One when Chirrut then starts doing the dodge thing that Kanan does. In the first episode, I think, or second episode of Rebels, when he reveals himself as a Jedi, he just steps out and there's blaster bolts, and instead of reflecting blaster bolts per se, he's just like stepping around them.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm making my camera all fucking fucked up.
That's cool.
It's all good. Anyway, so to move on from the training scene, because I don't want to dwell on this for very too much longer.
The space battle.
Okay. The cup thing, I thought that scene, Ahsoka being like, well, you just need discipline and patience. It's like, you fucking force communed with a deadly fucking creature. Like, when you were in diapers and couldn't talk.
Yeah.
Like you
I just
were
watched that.
born incredibly I think in the lore, the reason she was so fucking young in the Clone Wars animated movie was because she was the youngest person in a very, very long time in the Jedi Order to be assigned as a Padawan to a master. She was the youngest to do it. Like everybody else was like, that's why you're like, oh, all these younglings are about her age. That's fucking weird. But she's like, and she, she trained in the middle of a fucking war, right?
Yeah.
So she had got a really accelerated training, and was already gifted, right? And she's like, oh, some of it's talent.
Yeah.
You were not one to be like, it takes discipline and hard work.
She said talent is a factor, but yeah.
Talent is a factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, when clearly like, I mean, yes, I assume that she had pretty good discipline. I mean, they showed her to be a character who like is fairly wise in the Force. Definitely like made mistakes and stuff, but like definitely grew from her mistakes. And I think made some really good decisions and took some really heroic acts to defend other people. Faced off Maul by herself, right? Faced off fucking Grievous multiple times by herself. And Ventress as well. Like she's fucking fantastic duelist. Probably arguably the best duelist in the galaxy. After Order 66.
Oh,
like after Mace Windu got killed and Anakin got fucking hacked up and put in a suit, she was at that point the best fucking duelist in the galaxy, guaranteed. I bet if it was her versus Kenobi, she would beat Kenobi.
That's entirely possible. He's too defensive. You were right last week because you were saying like, oh, she's not looking for Jedi, she's looking for like lore keepers, and
also just to teach her to be still and to kind of like to temper her emotions to make her a better warrior.
Yeah, and so talking to Hugh Yang, she says, I don't need Sabine to be a Jedi, I just need her to be herself. And
they can move cups.
Maybe. But what really, I don't care if she can move cups, if she can develop a blaster kata, style thing. I don't know if you ever watched Equilibrium, but that was a fantastic movie, and that has yet to be done in a like front and center Star Wars story. Like you could do it in some of the games where you're like, oh, I can deflect blaster bolts with just my hands, and so you can make like a gunslinger Jedi who is just like pew pew coo 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 pew 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 coo coo. So I mean, I'd like to see that. I don't know.
And I don't need it. And I think that was, I think, my biggest issue with this episode is that I like that they linger with the characters. I'm not upset by that, but like to wait till episode 3 to give us, here is them training. She's not ever going to be a Jedi, even though she's my apprentice, right?
Padawan.
And to explain that the star map didn't lead to Thrawn, that the star map was actually an ancient map that tracked these fucking whales, like what
space whales,
the Purgil, right? And so like all of those things, we came out of the first 2 episodes being like, yeah, it's not a map to fucking Thrawn. Stop freaking out. It's a map that follows these ancient creatures. That's why he made the comment about it just being a fucking bedtime story to Jedi Padawan in the temple, is because it's such an ancient part of this galaxy's lore that like they uncovered it. So yes, that map showed them how to get to this other galaxy where she knows Thrawn is, because she's loosely connected to this sect of Force users. She's not loosely connected. She's the sole survivor of a sect of Force wielders who intuitively understood this, or made temples to help navigate, or made temples where these Purgil navigated so that they could travel through hyperspace way back when no one traveled through hyperspace. Right? And so you're going into like some of the deepest of the deepest of the deep lore, like Knights of the Old Republic shit.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned the Infinite Empire and the Star Forge, and I'm like, if they fucking incorporate that, I'm totally okay with them taking parts of Zahn's original Thrawn trilogy and smushing it up with shit from video games. People are like, oh, Merrick might be Galen Merrick, Starkiller, and And they were like, oh,
Okay.
that would actually be really good because then it's pitting Vader's apprentice versus Anakin's apprentice. And so
Yeah.
it's almost like him fighting himself, although this would be the official introduction of that character into canon. So it would be significantly different than the video game.
Oh, yeah.
Like he wouldn't necessarily be a fucking clone or anything like that. He could have just been a strong Inquisitor that Vader did not disdain, because Vader fucking hated the Inquisitorius, as far as we know, right? His interactions with it.
Right.
It was kind of the Emperor's project, and he was just in charge of it, right? He's like, go babysit these fucking Dark Force users.
I didn't want
they're not
to.
Sith, but at any rate, so I did like that little quip that Sabine gave to the cup. And I really liked the photography direction on that, because she's like, you win this time. And then the camera's like, does like a close up on the thing. Like it's almost like it's responding to her, but it's just a fucking cup.
Well, not only that, but it like dares you to think that you saw it move.
Oh yeah. Cause she's trying and you're like,
yeah.
And it's like, is it going to wiggle? Is it going to wiggle? No. It just like stares at her.
cool.
But I think that's kind of cool visual storytelling. I did like that.
So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to move on. If you want to finish your
I was going to say on to space combat, the area of great contention with me. Huh?
Oh, you didn't like it?
No, dude. So the lasers from the starfighters, so fucking weak. Like, I get that their ship is bigger, it's a transport, it's got heavier armor, but like the
more
the
shields.
starfighters, yeah. But the starfighters do not appear to have any sort of missile weapon or anything like that, and so they would have been entirely, focused on putting maximum power output into
the engines,
the lasers. Yeah. And so, like, it's just a question of like, what the fuck's going on? Why are these starfighters not doing any damage? And then I will say one thing: I was happy is you finally got to see them rotating the ship around as a method of evading hits. That's all I asked for. Like, I still don't think it is worth the maintenance that you'd have to do on that sort of system, where you have parts moving around all the time. But like, at least they made
like
it
on the fire spray.
Yeah, like at least they made it worthwhile.
The cockpit.
Yeah, the B-wing too.
Right.
And
right.
And like that was a big feature in Legends, was how much maintenance that required. And so like it's just not worth it in my opinion. Let's see. Turbo lasers, dude. You're firing a fucking capital scale weapon at this transport.
Fighter or whatever.
Yeah. And also the turbo lasers, for some reason, leave behind smoke clouds. And I'm prone to think like, oh, it's kind of showing what ablative shielding is, which is where you have like on the outer hull of your ship, there's an extra layer that just kind of breaks apart very easily, but it absorbs a lot of energy in the process. It's like how water has a high, potential for absorbing energy prior to changing states. Very similar idea, but like it's fucking turbo lasers. And if you watch closely enough, you can see that the clouds of smoke are not coming from the ship. They're coming from near the ship where the turbo laser is hitting the deflectors, I guess. I'm not entirely fucking sure. There's a scene where Elsbeth is like in the ship, like looking out as they're coming, and you can see very clearly that those poofs of smoke are very far from the actual hull of the ship. And so it makes me think that it's like, that's the deflector, but like, that is a terrible shield system. If your deflector is like so big that here's the plane of your ship and like they shoot up here and that's where your shields are still. It's like, wow, you're you are wearing out your deflectors, protecting against something that was never coming near you. So it's just kind of like, I really feel like you guys didn't think through space combat very well. And if I needed any more evidence to know that you didn't think through space combat very well, if there's a Jedi on top of a ship with lightsabers who can deflect laser bolts, you do not make strafing runs. No, you match speed with their derelict, broken-ass ship until you are just within firing range, and then you fucking pound the shit out of it. The story's over. Sabine's dead. Ahsoka's dead. We're done. We don't need to tell the story anymore. The
Yeah,
dark
we don't
side
need the
wins.
next 4 episodes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
what
fucking
is-
dark side wins. If they'd have done anything with fucking tactics, you light them up from, like Tool said, a good safe distance.
Yeah, and you know what? I did hear quite a few complaints that they're like, there were no stakes in that when they did the, and it's like, oh, pause, break, break scene or whatever. Oh yeah, I got him. And it's like, oh no, you didn't. And it's like there were no stakes in that. We knew they weren't going to fucking kill those 2 characters. So why even bother with that except because that's how they wrote the scene and they needed them to work together and they wanted to do the animation throwbacks, which seems to be a lot of what the show is.
Oh, but the thing is, if it were an animation throwback, it would have been these starships coming in, stopping, beep, 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 and she launches herself into space, does the full fucking Mary Poppin, Leia thing where she like uses the Force to drag herself to the ship, stabs into the ship, fucking kills the pilot, and then force Mary Poppins over to the next thing and fucking stabs them. Like,
I just want to say that between Rebels, between Rebels and the Clone Wars, they did a lot of that extra vehicular shit.
Right. And it leads me to believe they didn't have the budget. And so they were like, let's set up this stupid fight that would never fucking happen because it doesn't make sense tactically.
It doesn't make sense. And how the fuck did she put a whole spacesuit on so fast?
That's true. I mean,
This battle was ongoing.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, there was a break in the battle. Okay, we're going back into battle and I'm in the spacesuit.
You know what really gets me too? Okay, so you have the little like hyperspace ring and they're approaching it from this direction. They're like, turbo laser, turbo laser, turbo laser. Oh no, it's off our scopes as soon as it gets past the ring. Because, this is space, which is 3-dimensional, and you would have to have lasers pointing in every direction in order to properly defend this hyperspace ring. We can't possibly fire behind us, even though behind us is a fictional thing made up by, us. Because there is no such thing as behind us. You need to protect from all directions because you're in fucking space. I swear to God, the writers just need to hire someone who's familiar with, like, space combat. Just be like, what do you think? And he's like, I think it's fucking stupid. I think you need to do this.
Here's what I thought. I thought that they did the best job putting together a space dogfight scene.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best fucking live action dogfight scene since the fucking New Hope in the trench run.
Yeah.
Because how many of them are there? There's very few. What?
Starfighters?
Last Jedi, Poe ran a bomber. That's not the same thing.
Oh,
dogfighting was limited. The beginning of Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan and Anakin are just cruising through fucking that battle, fighting off droids. They're not dogfighting any fighters.
No, not at all. They don't get caught at all. Well, and that's the thing is like fighters in Star Wars are things that fight each other. And that is true to an extent in other science fiction. But I think Battlestar Galactica
true in real life. In real life, fighters provide escort to bombers or refuelers.
That's the main thing. They provide escort.
They need point defense against other fighters.
Not just against other fighters, but I think Battlestar Galactica did a really good job of showing that they can also be used to defend against anti-ship missiles. Like that is something that happens at
Battlestar Galactica. They can get the missiles to lock onto them and then take them away from the...
Not just lock onto them, but they're so small that they won't get detected by them and they can just intercept them and fire upon them. And that is something that got covered in the Sci-Fi Network, Battlestar Galactica, was that like, yeah, starfighters do dogfights only when they have to. Their main job is to stop missiles from reaching capital ships.
Yeah. I felt the villains did not get enough screen time.
Yeah.
I felt that a lot of this episode focused on a couple characters when like we've now expanded this quite a bit. I would have totally been okay seeing a fucking Mon Mothma talking to those other senators. Like a scene where she's just like, you don't get it. Oh, it's the politics. Oh, she just to show that she's still a fucking fighter. I thought and basically Tara being like, were you even in the war or were you just waiting to see who was going to come out on top to choose sides?
Yeah. And that was something. She's a terrible diplomat. Like,
and she's a terrible general.
She's not.
Those are her bosses.
That's true. She's not
never fucking happen.
That's true. But I mean, ultimately, if you just focus on the main thing, she's a terrible diplomat. But she was never meant to be one. But like, if you watch Rebels, she's pretty diplomatic. Yeah, she's pretty diplomatic.
She
makes
made
shit
and
happen.
met contacts. She did all that
Yeah.
shit. In fact, she was the only one who had contact with fucking Ahsoka as Fulcrum.
Yeah,
Remember, because there was that whole
that's the name I
arc where
couldn't
Sabine was
remember,
like, "What
yeah.
the fuck?" Like,
Yeah.
and then Kanan's like, "I was already fought in a fucking war. I fought in the Clone Wars. I don't want to fight in this war." Like,
Mhm.
and Sabine's like, "You have to like stop keeping secrets." And Hera's just like, "Yeah, but like we're fucking essentially a fucking terror network. Like, we don't want to know each other because if fucking one of us gets caught, we want to have fucking, severability so that you can get fucking tortured.
We want to be the French resistance
because you don't know anything."
Yeah, you don't. Turns out your neighbor's part of the. I
did like the dogfight scene. I thought they wasted Shin. I thought Shin should have had a fucking helmet on. She's in a starfighter, and she just had that stupid fucking headset from episode 3. And everybody's like, "Oh, you see the fucking? It's the same headset from episode 3." He's like, "I don't need that fucking Easter egg. I want to show where she's like." I don't care even if it shows her face. Like, you probably want to show her face. Like, she's got a nice face.
That's
right?
the main thing. Well, that's the main thing is that you have to, like, this popped up in The Mandalorian, is you have the helmet factor, where it's like you want to show off your actor. That's why, Stallone, took off his helmet for fucking, Judge Dredd. But, Carl Urban was like, no, I'm going to stay true to the character. He would never take off his helmet.
Oh, is this
I don't care if people don't recognize
Carl Urban
him.
was the guy who did the remakes?
Yeah.
I did see part of that, and I thought it was a very interesting.
It was badass.
It was pretty cool reinterpretation of the material.
Yeah, it was really badass, and I just love the fact that it was like, no, I don't need to take off my helmet. I never would. Like, every time you take off your helmet, you die. Like, look, Starship Troopers.
Can you continue ranting about helmets for like 1 minute?
Sure, I can rant about helmets. Let's see. Helmet. Lord Helmet. Man, that helmet was so big he couldn't even accomplish normal things. Something that I've seen in current Star Wars is that helmets are just kind of for protection, and they don't really show too often the user interface that comes along with most of the helmets. Like, when it came to Boba Fett, like, there was nothing, absolutely nothing on what it was like to be Boba Fett, but fans and writers alike were like, oh yeah, like, he only sees this far, but like, why wouldn't it have cameras off to this side and everything so you could see, all this stuff? And anyone who's ever played a first-person shooter with a high field of view would know that, like, yeah, it's a lot to take in, but you get used to it pretty quick. And so, like, you could definitely go back to the old way and just be like, yeah, it's not just a tinted lens that goes over their eyes to protect their eyes. Like, this is a high-tech universe. They absolutely would have taken the opportunity to a targeting computer. Targeting. Oops, sorry, wrong one. Targeting computers and stuff like that. And
yeah, or at least just protect it from stellar radiation. Remember, there's no atmosphere. So when they flip around and they're pointed at a fucking sun.
Well, I was just talking about how it's absolute garbage that, like, helmets have become just a thing you wear for protection. But in the Legends, like, the fans, the authors and stuff, they made it so it's like, no, man, why wouldn't you cram all the high-tech shit you possibly could in there? Like, I remember that Boba Fett was supposed to have like a link in between his snub nose blaster and his helmet. So there's like a camera on the fucking what do you call it?
On the visual
on the
display?
scope. Yeah, like on the scope. And so he like points it over here and he sees that as like a picture in picture, over here or something like that. And like, to us, it's like, man, that'd be so much data. But it's like, yeah, you do it for like, 5-6 missions, you're used to it.
Yeah,
and so like
it's training. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, I absolutely like want a return to that. But as far as I can tell, there's no canonicity to it. Yeah. And I wonder if they're avoiding
storytelling, bro.
Well, I wonder if they're avoiding it to avoid the comparison to like Iron Man, because he had Jarvis and he had all the little targeting computers that were telling him where to go and everything. And so I wonder if they're just like, oh, it's too Iron Man.
No, because they've already had that little thing, the fucking little thing that flips down when they want to shoot a rocket.
Yeah, that's true.
They've had that shit for a while. And that's integrated into their helmet, right?
That's true. Yeah.
It's an additional like display or whatever. And
yeah. Purgils, man.
Purgil. I thought
That
they
was
did
a
a great
scene that
job
worked.
translating them.
That was a scene that worked. That was a scene
Yeah.
where it made an environmental hazard that could be avoided and utilized in order to make sure that nobody was attacking all that stuff. And I really enjoyed that scene, especially as compared to the space scene where everything was really open and they should be dead.
Yeah, so with that, I thought they underutilized the villains. I did like the Purgle scene. I like the overall dogfight feel. I think they realistically did a lot of that just so they can be like, oh, see, Ahsoka is giving in as a trainer. And you saw her smile, and she's like, good job. She smiles, like, and so they
what
kind of
what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, and Hu Yang's just like, we're gonna both die if you guys fucking keep being assholes to each other, which really kind of establishes why they stopped working together in the first place. I just felt like this episode tied up all the loose ends we knew existed from the first two, like with the star map and the training specifically, when they could have just done it with a tiny bit more dialogue in the first two episodes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the Purgo was fucking amazing. I did feel like you said, oh, it's an environmental hazard. I was like, a lot of this feels like this would be really kind of like when I watched the first season of Mandalorian. I'm like, oh my God, this is like a role-playing game, basically.
Yeah.
And each scene, the cut scene, okay, then this is our mission, and then this is our mission, and like, here's the big baddie, and how do you solve this problem? And all that shit. It felt very it felt structured like a RPG campaign.
Yes.
And you're right, as far as an environmental hazard. All right, make a piloting a space check with 2 setback. Oh, you're force sensitive.
It was foggy.
Communicating. Sorry, go ahead.
It was foggy / misty. They had the Purgils coming out of nowhere. It was a perfect opportunity to utilize the environment in order to make a getaway. I thought it was well done.
Yeah, I think that would actually be really fun. We have things to do. I'm not sure exactly what you're going to do, but you're going to come up a couple days before camping.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be really cool, not only to record our next shooting the Poodoo together in the same space.
I don't even know how that would work. I don't know how that would work.
On Wednesday.
Yeah.
What I'll probably do is take the laptop. You can sit at my desktop and run OBS. And then I'll just sit in the same room. Well,
I guess. I mean,
like
technologically,
another camera.
Yeah, technologically, I'm just like, I mean, I guess that all works.
I mean, most studios, they just have a bunch of different cameras. We would just set up 2 cameras.
Yeah. And you can absolutely do that in OBS directly without utilizing OBS Ninja. That's too much nerdery. Anyway, moving on.
Oh, I didn't want to say
when they shut down the power.
Real quickly to finish my thought, which is completely unrelated. I think it'd be really cool to actually do some YouTube shorts where we're like, this scene as a role-playing game. I've seen somebody else do that. But not like they've done like a I think Tabletop Empire did like scene in Mandalorian as like FFG fucking dice rolls.
Like
all right, and then he got this, and then setbacks interpreted like this, and that. And I thought that was really fucking cool and creative. It'd be fun to do that. Anyway, when the ship blew up.
No. When they shut down power on the ship, they had gotten away.
When they
Purgils, they shut down power. The first thing I noticed, because of course I noticed it, is it shows it from a different angle where you can kind of like see past them out the window, and there's so many red lights on buttons and stuff like that. 2 problems with that. One, you shut down most of the power. That's still a power signature. If they have the proper resolution on their sensors, they're going to find that. But you don't even need to have fancy sensors. The only forgiveness I give it here is that it took place apparently at dusk. And so the sun was still up, even though it was coming through clouds and getting really, dispersed.
It would have washed out.
It would have washed out the red lights. But if they had stayed any amount longer past sundown, like you will hear legit stories about people that are like, oh yeah, we were out to sea and I saw someone light up a cigarette from like 3 miles away. Because like there's black. Nothing. It's pitch black except for like stars and moon. And then like a flame pops, or the cherry of a fucking cigarette, gets pulled on. and like they just had these red lights everywhere, and I'm like, red light travels really well too. Like more so, it'll make it through like dust and clouds and stuff like that. So it's just
Yeah,
like,
and they didn't
whoa,
have any
guys.
cover either, and
Yeah.
they landed a ship in a big clearing, and they flew pretty much right over it and didn't see it.
Yeah.
I would forgive them not being able to scan it, right? What did you
Very
think
minimal,
about that? The other bits of dialogue with Hu Yang when she's like, "Why did we come out so far?" Like that's again another fucking Easter egg or throwback, right? But
Oh
like,
yeah.
what do you think about like
standard
when
Jedi
Vader
training?
fucking choked out what's his name when they arrived too close to Hoth?
Oh,
And,
no, I
and
didn't
then they
make
made
that
it like
connection.
so he came out too close, and that's so Hu Yang's just basically like Vader killed that guy because he violated Jedi protocol.
No, I didn't make that.
Not because he
connection at
violated
all.
protocol, because he made a mistake and alerted them to their presence.
Well, no,
But
I'm just saying I didn't make that connection at all. That's a very valid connection though. Yeah.
yeah,
Hopes for next episode? Because I got some hopes. I hope that there's a cool fight in the forest, and I hope that they put some money into the CGI so that we can have Ahsoka, like, jumping around. I really hope that they work together again.
she did run and do some flips.
Yeah. Oh boy. I really hope that Ahsoka and Sabine get a chance to work together in order to like draw people in a certain direction, utilize each other's strengths, which arguably wasn't really done in this episode. Instead, I would say that Ahsoka just kind of turned everything over to Sabine because it was her venue. It is her strong place. But like in a dark forest, neither one of them is. Arguably, Ahsoka is the better person. She grew up in that environment, and so I'm really hoping that they'll give an opportunity for them to work together, put some CGI into some fancy jumps from tree to tree, do some fucking crouching tiger, hidden dragon shit.
Yeah,
like
that's
I
where
know
she's
this is
from, right?
What?
Natasha Liu Bordizzo. I'm pretty sure she was in like a Netflix season of Crouching. They made like a TV show, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I think.
Oh, I didn't know that at all.
I think that's where she's from, or maybe I'm confusing her with somebody that's in the Acolyte.
Okay,
it could be. I'm kind of nerd out on this shit, but bro, like,
I think
there's
so.
a limit to how far. I
think so. Looking into it, I looked into what she was in, and I didn't see very much. So I don't.
She's doing a fucking excellent job.
Oh yeah, I mean, she's embodying the character very well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I mean, I hope that means you just like watched
her and Hu Yang have made the show. I like Balin a lot. I'm really upset that he got no part in this, and I'm mad that Shin, who in the first 2 episodes was kind of an interesting villain, just got this like, oh, don't let him get away. Except they kind of teased this like conflict between. I'm almost wondering if Balin and Morgan potentially have a romantic thing.
Ooh.
And Shin is fucking jealous because either A, she wants to bone her fucking master, or B, which is, what do they call that? Fraternization. We don't do that shit. We don't fraternize. Or alternatively, she just like, because like, where else is that coming from? Because in the first 2 episodes, they kind of made it sound like, oh, you're mercenaries. So yeah, of course we came and rescued you because you paid us enough. And now she's like, oh, you didn't finish the job. I'll finish the job. And it's just like kind of almost weird master, like Ahsoka Sabine master apprentice vibe being transcribed onto someone who's an apprentice, but not to the person they're having this conflict with.
The competitiveness
vibes like that they were kind of being catty with each other.
Yes, and I figured it was due to the in prior scenes. Shin had questioned her abilities because it's like she's not a Jedi, she's not a Sith, she's nothing. It's like, oh, she's a witch. It's like, what even is that? And so I get the feeling that there is a bit of like wanting to prove superiority. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I would like to see more of that play out. I think Shin is an interesting character. I think that the villains were one of the best things of the first 2 episodes. Yeah. And they did fucking nothing with them.
I really
open fire or go this direction or break off and that's it. That's all they did.
I really wish that you could beta test TV shows before like finishing filming. Like, get the story done. farm it out to the fans, like find some fans that you can trust. They sign non-disclosure agreements. You get them past the first few hurdles and they don't squeal, and then involve those fans, because like it really feels like
You're talking about writing by council.
Yeah, that's what I
we
want.
should govern by council too.
Yeah. I really do think that like this is such a thing that has been more or less owned by the fans, that like you should involve them in the process to some extent. And like you might have heated arguments in between, Filoni and some fans, but ultimately if like some hardcore fans can, meet out their ideas and just be like, oh yeah, like here's all my points for why this is how it should be, then you just got to be like, wow, you're fucking right. And we're going to change that story. It's a good thing we haven't even started filming yet.
Right. All right, man. Well, that's an hour and a half. I think we should wrap up, even if we could keep talking. Go ahead and roll that music. All right. Thanks for joining us today. Shooting the Poodoo episode 30, which has been a lot of fun doing these Shooting the Poodoos. I think I like it more than the regular show sometimes. Join us Monday.
The other shows are harder.
There's so much more work to produce. This was easy because it was just shit I was watching anyway. I was like, oh, that'd be cool to talk about.
Exactly.
Interview with Canadian Prepper. I watch this shit. I watch almost everything he does.
Exactly. Yeah.
At any rate, join us Monday. We're actually going to get around finally to talking about what's going on in Africa.
Yep.
I'm trying to do that a little justice, but largely approach it the way we've approached a lot of these things, which is out of curiosity and with the desire to understand complex issues and the various nuances. This whole project is kind of a response to some other people, especially in left media space, that assert themselves and their opinions as like these as fact when they're completely ignoring things, or they're saying things that they don't realize it contradicts each other, etc., etc. This is an attempt to kind of approach left politics from a much more reasonable position, meaning argument and finely crafted arguments and critical thinking. And we watched the video about Canadian Prepper, which kind of feeds into our broader discussion of what's going to happen and how to kind of navigate and soften the blow as the economy contracts and political institutions continue to fail. And then we talked a bit about the Oliver Anthony and cleared some air around him, and gave credit where credit is due. And we talked about Ahsoka, which is like, I don't know, what did you rate out of 10 episode 3 of Ahsoka?
Probably like a 6.
Yeah, I gave it a 7. I liked it.
Yeah.
It was fun, but like it did not hit in a lot of ways. And I gave the first 2 episodes combined a 6.5. So this was better.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah, and I think that I look forward to talking about the next episode. Next week, we're going to hopefully record Shooting the Poodoo together in-house. And then we'll just set it up to broadcast Thursday because we will be off-grid.
Damn.
Around showtime.
I hate being off-grid. It's a damn, I hate being off-grid.
I don't actually know. There's a couple of mountain communities up there. There's just not a lot of cell service and not a lot of fucking internet access, like way up in the middle of fucking nowhere. But we could. There could be a cell tower that's used to communicate for EMS or anything like that we can connect to. We didn't have cell service in the valley where we were at our last camp spot, except if you went down towards the river, which was like, a 5-10 minute walk from camp. And then you get like 1 or 2 bars and at least send some text messages.
Yeah. And hang out by the guy who lives in his van down by the river.
In the van down by the river, and that's exactly what happened. Well, this has been With Thunder's Applause, a podcast where 2 friends get together to discuss events and ideas, and sometimes, or more often than not, talk about Star Wars too. I was your host, Steve, along with my co-host, Zach, and we like to remind you that when liberty dies, it dies.
With thunderous applause.
Much love, people.
More thunderous than that, though.
More thunderous.
More thunderous.
Now some